Hello, I'm Donal McCauley, and welcome to medicsvoices.com, where we talk to the key opinion leaders in health and medicine around the world. Today we're in the United States, and I'm talking to Viviana Martinez-Bianchi. Viviana, you were brought up in Argentina, but you were greatly influenced by your father.
My dad was a vascular surgeon, and even though he was, one could say, a more narrow-focused specialist, I learned from him that I think he, in many ways, was my first role model as a family doctor. He was a surgeon who will speak often about smoking cessation, who will talk about prevention, who carry his doctor's bag. He always had a black doctor's bag in his trunk, and we will also go sailing. My family grew up sailing on this very wide river, the Paraná River, that it's one of the largest rivers in South America or in Latin America, and he will always take his doctor's bag in our sailboat, and as we will be sailing among different islands in the river, fishermen will come to him, and we're talking fishermen in little, in boats with a little outboard motor, and he will take care of them, and he will bring prescriptions for high blood pressure, for diabetes. He will cure wounds. He would take care of different things. He knew them, they knew him. Every now and then we will have to carry somebody back to the city because that person was so ill they needed access to emergency care, and they lived out in the islands. And so I learned from him that community is it's part of the work that we do, and I always envision myself as a primary care doctor that will have a very strong community engaged portion of her practice. And that's one thing that he influenced me. And another one was I was 14 years old when the Alma Ata Declaration happened in 1978, and he came home, and this was a difficult time during Argentina. I was in Argentina during the dictatorship, but it was in all of the newspapers, regular newspapers, magazines, that the Alma Ata Declaration had taken place, and he was certain that this was going to change the course of the world, that because there was an emphasis on health as a human right and on primary care and primary health care, he felt this was going to be something that would make a tremendous difference around the world. And he was so excited. And I told him, I started thinking about this, and I told him that I was going to be a primary care doctor that had a world emphasis, and that I would work, I wanted to be working with the United Nations and the World Health Organization, like I saw these people during the information of the declaration. So that definitely he's impacted, and he died too young to even see me beyond my first year after finishing medical school. But he's always in my mind, in how he, in a way, was this compass that marked a route for me to follow.
Well, he clearly was an inspiration, and he was very active in his own way. But you were an activist.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I've been an activist, I think, all my life. Again, I grew up during the dictatorship, and one of the things that we noticed as I went to enter medical school, entering medical school was very restricted to very few, and with even people who would pass the entry exams wouldn't get in. It was just a and so one morning I get to the university. I was this is first year of medical school, still during the dictatorship in 1983, and I we marched to as students. We decided we were going on a hunger strike to change the rules to request to the chancellor's office to request that admission to medical school be changed so that more people coming from the community would enter medical school, that it shouldn't be the children of doctors and the children of high-ranking officers that should be entering. And um, by the way, I was the daughter of a doctor, but I didn't go to the same university as my father did because I wanted to be me, not my dad's daughter. No, even though I admire him, I wanted to be able to create my own path. And so we marched to the chancellor's office, and we were about 100 medical students. And in those times, it was very rare first of all, for medical students to be activists, to activate. Um, that was more common coming from the School of Philosophy or psychology students or other liberal arts and non-medicine. And so it was remarkable. Um, and as we arrived to the I'm making the story long, but I think maybe it's interesting. Once we arrived to the chancellor's office, we were surrounded by police with arms drawn at us. It was pretty scary at that time. And then the student leaders started talking to the police officers. The chief of police was there, and he explained that our dream was that the children of police officers could attend medical school if they were interested and passed the exams, and that we felt the rules needed to be more equitable. And then he said, well, right, we are going to protect you. What we didn't know that day was that the police officers had gone on strike against the military dictatorship because they had not been paid for 4 months. And so I wouldn't be telling you this story, I think. And then as the military police arrived and surrounded this whole area, the police officers turned to them and said that everything was okay, it was under control, and that they were there to protect and calm the situation. And so they left. And so I'm very, um, and it was a hunger strike that lasted 9 days. And I woke up on the ninth day in the emergency room. I had passed out. What happened was our school at the University of Rosario in Argentina started, and then the University of Córdoba followed, and then University of La Plata, and University of Buenos Aires. What happened was all of the medical schools started going on strike also. In our city of Rosario, which is, I think at that time was like 1.5 million people, people started surrounding us. Singers started doing concerts. I mean, it became this like big uh, awakening in some ways after years of dictatorship. And so the minister of, not only the chancellor, the minister of education also resigned, and the minister of health. So it became much bigger than we had anticipated, and allowed the entry of thousands of medical students that had been left behind for several years to enter the school. So yes, so I've been that type of person that looks at issues and wants to do something about it. And to me, that was like a fast entry into politics that I had not expected. My parents were terrified, as you can imagine. They sent my father sent my mom and my grandma to get me out of there, and I was not going to leave, and stayed. But yeah.
So, like many graduates from Argentina, you went to the United States.
Yeah, several things happened. I left Argentina because I learned about family medicine. I left Argentina because in 1990, when I graduated, um, there was a lot of anti-women sentiment in medical education. It's like, what do you pretend being a woman? Too many women for the first time historically, 60% of the graduates in 1990 were women, and that had never happened before in the history of Argentina, or at least in our medical school. The University of Rosario is a national university, and professors were really very, very mean, anti-women. And in the US, I was being recruited because I was a woman. So it was not so hard for me to say, in my country, I'm being treated differently during my medical education because I'm a woman, and in the US, I was being recruited to the US because I was a woman, and there were not that many women doctors, and definitely not enough people who spoke Spanish. This we're talking back to 1990, and so I left, and I didn't leave with the intention to leave Argentina for good. I left to train in family medicine. When I learned about family medicine, Argentina was just starting, and I didn't know any family doctor in Argentina. So I went to the US. I came to the US to train in family medicine, and I did 2 years in a program that had an emphasis on mental health in family medicine, and then we finished the next 2 years at the University of Iowa, and I was chief resident there, and then I was a rural doctor, and I married a U.S. citizen. My husband Greg, born in Chicago, and then we just never went back. And I also realized that I had a big role in this country with like my knowledge of immigrant health and my knowledge of Spanish and the understanding of the immigrant experience. And so even though throughout the 30 years that I've been in practice in the US as a clinician, and first as a rural doctor, and then in an academic medical center where half of my time is clinical, I have worked a lot, even though not all of my patients happen to be immigrants and members of the Comunidad Latina, the Spanish-speaking people. I've been a big part of that community and in making sure that we're improving health for everybody and that we are inclusive. We're creating health systems that where those voices are heard.
I read that you found after a while that it was too cold in Iowa.
You
How'd
did
you
read
move?
right. You read right. We lived for 11 winters. I always say so. We lived in Iowa for 11 winters. And after 11 winters, where there are some days where you're wishing for snow because if it snows, it's going to be much warmer than it is. Um, I was done. I just needed to move south, and I begged my husband to please let's see if we can find jobs in the southern part of the U.S. And I was looking for an academic medical center. My husband was a urologist, and so we came to work at Duke University. But yes, I loved the people of Iowa. I enjoyed it. I loved their teamwork mentality. There was this about this like getting together, everybody working together for a common good, like a lot of that rural way of, especially, and also winter way of doing, something happens to a community member, to a home, sometimes a tornado will take a house down and the community will come together. And I was very fortunate to have started my career as a family doctor, as a rural doctor, and um, even in the winters of Iowa. um, but I'm
Right.
very happy to live in a nicer weather, although it is much hotter here as well.
So you've brought all this experience of family medicine, both rural and urban, to Duke. Tell us about your work in Duke.
So right now, I'm director for health equity, an emphasis on health for all in the Department of Family Medicine and Community Health. And 50% of my time is dedicated to doing clinical work, where I do what we call in the US full spectrum outpatient family medicine. And I also do a newborn nursery rounds. So for the last 2 weeks, I was on call um, as a team member in the newborn nursery, taking care of all the babies that are being born to moms, the babies that are not needing the special care nursery, that are staying, they're rooming in with their moms. Our department takes care of them. Um, and the other part of my time is related to health equity, and both through a grant. I am doing. I have a team that does research on in trying to increase the number of Latino members of the Latino community that have health insurance. A lot of people are eligible for health insurance in the U.S. but do not have the health insurance. So we're doing an education intervention on this and with community health workers. And I also have an emphasis on health equity, which allows me the time to be able to do the work I'm doing with WONCA, which is a volunteer activity for WONCA.
You've brought us nicely to talk about WONCA, so tell us how you got involved with WONCA.
Like I said, ever since I was 14 years old, I thought I would want to do global work. And at the same time, when I first arrived to the United States, I first needed to like cement my knowledge of the US healthcare system, which is very complex and complicated. I also became, as you know, as an activist. And another thing that I learned from my parents or my dad, my parents, both my mom and dad, but it was that you don't need to, you can be involved in organizational politics. I don't need to be participating in politics in a party, but I can do it in a medical organization. My parents during the dictatorships were very involved with their organizations. My dad as a vascular surgeon, my mom as a biochemist. So I learned that, right? You can actually impact what happens with health through membership in your medical organizations. And so the American Academy of Family Physicians was very important to me. The Iowa Academy of Family Physicians, I became a member of the board of directors of the Iowa Academy. And then after, like I mentioned, after living in Iowa for 11 years, we moved to North Carolina. I was about to be the president of the Iowa Academy when we moved to North Carolina. And I found myself, okay, I want to continue my activism through impacting our medical society and our specialty society, family medicine. But then, of course, I'm new in the state. It's going to be, and so I went to a mentor, to Kathy Andolsek, who looks at me and says, Viviana, why the North Carolina Academy? Why not WONCA? And I said, oh, you're right. She goes, why do you think WONCA? She goes, well, you speak several languages. You're binational. You understand different cultures. You will be. And so she pointed me that. And what was happening also at that same time, Rich Roberts was the president of WONCA, maybe the president-elect of WONCA at that time. And Rich had been my mentor through the American Academy of Family Physicians because I was a delegate to the AAFP Congress of Delegates when Rich was a president-elect president-elect of the American Academy of Family Physicians. So I called him up. I talked to him and I said, hey, I want to be involved. And he said, oh, Vivi, this is a great timing. This is what WONCA is doing. And it was all, getting in touch with him. Something very interesting was about to happen. The United Nations had called for the first high-level meeting on NCDs. It was, I believe, 2011. And Rich tells me that WONCA was trying to impact what the statements were at the NCD meeting, but they had not been able to get in. And again, this is like how sometimes chance and destiny meet together when you're paying attention. I had met with a friend I had not seen for 17 years who was an Argentinian diplomat in the United Nations. He was an ambassador to the UN, and he tells me he was one of the organizers of the NCD meeting, and he had told me that they needed representative of civil society of Argentina to attend the meeting. And so suddenly, not only I ended up attending the meetings as part of the Argentinian delegation, but because he was one of the writers of the document, Rich Roberts and I were able to meet with him on Skype. That was the time of Skype, and help for the wording of that NCD declaration, which was very, very important. And it got me going. And then Rich asked me if I could go with him to the meeting. There was a cumbre. The CINF is the Ibero-America region of WONCA, holds every 2 years, they hold a high-level summit, a cumbre, which is presidents of all the region, together with PAHO, ministers of health, and academic settings get together to discuss important issues from a policy perspective for family medicine. And so I attended the Paraguayan Cumbre at request from Rich Roberts, because he wanted me to go and help with the translation. He was very specific. I don't want to miss anything that happens, and I want you to be there to translate both the wording and the sense of what's going on, right? And so I became involved, and then I continued to go to all of the meetings of the Iberoamericana regional, of the Americana WONCA region, and then ended up attending Prague, the conference in, I think it was 2013, and I was elected to the OEC, the Organizational Equity Committee, and then I started dreaming the possibility of running for office as a member at large, and then, 12 years later, I'm president-elect, and I'm so honored to be able to represent family doctors from around the world. I feel very responsible to try to really understand family medicine and in all of its complexity, family medicine, general practice, community medicine in all of its perspectives, because it's a little bit different in each country, and the needs are different in each country, and the impact can be different. But I'm hopeful for my next 2 years ahead as president.
So the obvious question now, to follow on from that you're the incoming president, is what are your aims and objectives for your time as president?
There are certain things that are very important to me. Is health for all, comprehensive primary care, and for that, to improve health for people through comprehensive primary care, we need more family doctors, and we need the insertion of family doctors in health systems around the world. We need them in academic medical centers. We still have in some countries it's well recognized, but in other countries it's not part of the academic offerings for medical students. So many of them just happen to run into family medicine. They don't have a real knowledge of it through their academic education, through the medical school. So I would love to really see that strengthen. I also think we have a missed opportunity. As I go to all the regional conferences, I see abstracts showing amazing type of work, and they kind of die in that conference. And would love to see a journal of a WONCA journal that brings the perspectives that we see in those regional conferences into papers that are published, especially from low and middle income countries. A lot of our colleagues do amazing work that doesn't make it into the known journals that are dominated by English language, right? And so I would love to see that we highlight the amazing experiences happening around the world. I would love to see more South-South collaboration, North-South collaboration, but especially, like, I have seen amazing things happening in the global South that we don't get to learn from in the global North, and I would love to see that highlighted. And I want us to work more on advocacy and policy. What is it that we need to do so that we can strengthen primary care in every country in the world through family medicine and their teams?
Let me ask you a final question. Thinking back to that 14-year-old girl following her dad around with his medical bag, how do you think that 14-year-old girl has done with her life?
I think she has done more than she ever thought possible. I think I wish it was possible to get together with my dad and talk and think back, right? And I'm not able to do so, but I think he would be very proud of that career that he saw was possible, and that the dreams that he had as a father, for a daughter growing up in a difficult country, in a difficult situation, did come through, and I was able to achieve more than he or I ever imagined during that time. Um, but I think the other thing that he will be very proud of is that the achievement is not mine, it's for the people. And that I hope to be able that through my work that to elevate the voices of so many family doctors and so many communities that we care for. And so I think that 14-year-old will be surprised and happy today to know what happened in the next almost 60 years or 50 years rather.
Viviana, thank you very much for sharing so much of your life, your inspiration, your family, and may I wish you every success as your president of WONCA. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Donald. It's thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.